2024 was my first low buy / no buy year, and overall it was a pretty successful experience. And in celebration of that, I kind of wanted to go over all of the pretty shiny makeup that I was very tempted to buy over the last year, but didn't, and how I managed to talk myself out of it, and whether or not I think I will be buying it now in 2025 when I have relaxed a lot of those restrictions on my beauty purchases. So I'm going to go ahead and put up some images here on this side of the screen that are going to show you the products that I'm talking about. Now, not everything on this list will actually have been released in 2024, but that's when they first really kind of made their way onto my wish list in a really significant way, probably because that was the point at which I wasn't permitting myself to buy them. So 3 foundations really piqued my interest in 2024. One of them was the Urban Decay Vice Bond Foundation, the Huda Beauty Easy Blur Foundation, and the Lisa Eldridge The Foundation. Now, I know Lisa Eldridge's foundation has been around for a while at this point, but last year, as part of my Turn and Burn project, I went through some samples that I had of that foundation, and I found it so similar to my absolute favorite foundation, which is the Dior Backstage Face and Body Foundation. That is my #1 favorite foundation of all time. I really enjoy the medium buildable coverage. It looks incredibly natural on the skin, but you can build up to get more coverage as well. It is super lightweight, very long wearing, even on my combo oily skin, and has a really flattering, natural skin-like finish. I found that the Lisa Eldridge really kind of hit all of those notes for me as well. And while going through those samples, I was able to identify my perfect shade as well. So that definitely was kind of a temptation. And I did manage to finish a fair number of base products last year. My foundations were on a replacement low buy, so I actually did end up having the freedom to purchase that foundation if I so chose. However, the reason why I ended up not pulling the trigger on that one, well, first of all, the Lisa Eldridge foundation, super spendy, but I also still have about 1/5 of a bottle of my Dior Backstage foundation still in my collection. And I felt like the 2 foundations were similar enough that it didn't make sense for me to purchase the Lisa Eldridge foundation while I was still working on the Dior Backstage. Now, the question is, am I going to buy it in 2025? I may. I am currently working on the Dior Backstage as part of my Throwback 30 project pan. I think I will totally be able to finish it before that project wraps up, so I definitely will have a vacancy. Whether or not I actually buy it, I'm not sure, simply because it is quite expensive, and at this point, looking in my foundation drawer, I'm going to pull it out right now. Looking at my foundation drawer, I went through a fairly sizable declutter of my foundations at the beginning of the year. I will link that video up here so you can take a look at my entire foundation inventory and what I ended up getting rid of. But I have been left with a drawer full of foundations that, for the most part, I really enjoy. So while, yes, I would technically have a Dior Backstage shaped hole in my collection at that point, I don't think I will really be suffering for a lack of other foundations that I could enjoy in the meantime. So I'm not going to rule that purchase out completely for 2025, but as it stands now, I think I can wait a little bit longer on this one. The Huda Beauty Easy Blur Foundation was the most recent release that I was really tempted to try out, simply because it just really does sound very much up my alley. It has got that medium buildable coverage that is more of a soft matte finish. It is a little bit more long wearing. We've kind of been awash in skin tints over the last couple of years, and although I do enjoy a good skin tint, despite my combo oily skin, there is definitely a place for a good skin tint in my collection. I really don't need more than 1 or 2 of those, and I've got my bases covered there. However, because the Huda Beauty Easy Blur is so much along the lines of what I enjoy, it does sound an awful lot like several other foundations that I already have in my collection. And I don't know that I need another one right now. And that's kind of what I clung to last year, especially while I was working on my Dior Backstage, my Natasha Denona Foundation X, and my Soap and Glory Kick-Ass foundations. Now, I haven't used the Huda Beauty Easy Blur foundation, so I don't know how comparable that formulation is to those 3 foundations that I just listed. But aside from the blurring, which I've heard in a couple of reviews that it is not necessarily a super blurring foundation, that doesn't put me off at all, because that's not really what I look for foundations to do for me. If I need some blurring, I have some beautiful powders that I can reach for to serve that purpose for me. However, again, the level of coverage, the finish, and the claims of this foundation are so similar to some other things that I already have in my collection and really do love. I was able to talk myself out of this particular purchase. Will I buy it in the next year? Probably, especially if I finish my Dior Backstage and my Soap and Glory foundations, which I'm really focusing on doing this coming year. I may actually go ahead and pull the trigger and buy the Easy Blur. Another thing that was very compelling about the foundation was the number of really, really positive reviews that it got from other content creators whose opinions I really do quite respect. Especially Robert Welsh. He was the one that mentioned that he didn't think that it was a super blurring foundation, but it was a very, very nice one nonetheless. So I don't know. I may be more willing to purchase the Huda Beauty over the Lisa Eldridge simply because of the difference in cost. But we'll see. I don't know. We'll see how I end up on that one. The third one was the Urban Decay Face Bond Foundation. And spoiler alert, I bought it. I bought it at the beginning of February. You'll see this in my February roundup. I have not yet busted it out. But this had actually been on my wish list since it released. It got really, really good reviews. So I had been thinking about this one for a long time. So when it popped up on Ulta on sale for, I think it was $28, I just couldn't resist. I just couldn't resist. I haven't even busted it open yet, but I'm excited to do so. So spoiler alert for that one. This one did actually finally get me. I will let you guys know how I feel about this one as soon as I've had a chance to put it to the test. Another release that really intrigued me over this last year was the Danessa Myricks Water Powder Serum. I am a huge fan of her Blurring Balm Powder. It is my absolute #1 holy grail oil controlling primer. I finished one in the shade Universal earlier last year, and I was considering purchasing the water powder serum instead of the blurring balm powder, just out of a sense of adventure, out of wanting to try something new and seeing how well it would serve a similar purpose for me. I managed to talk myself out of that simply because I was working on another product that was in my 24 in 2024. I didn't quite get it finished, but it was my Rimmel Stay Matte oil controlling primer, which I don't think is quite as oil controlling as the Danessa Myricks Blurring Balm Powder, but it does the job well enough that I didn't feel like I needed to rush out and repurchase a high-end oil controlling primer simply to fill that hole in my collection. So I'm actually still currently working on the Rimmel Stay Matte primer. I don't have a lot of use for it in the middle of the winter. My skin is much more normal during these colder months. So I definitely have not been reaching for a mattifying primer over the last couple of months. Once summertime rolls around and I do finish that Rimmel Stay Matte, I may be in the market for something like this, but I'm not sure if it's going to be the water powder serum or even the blurring balm powder. As much as I do like the blurring balm powder, my sense of adventure may get the better of me. Several other products have hit the market in that intervening time that I've heard a lot of really good stuff about. I do know that I've heard a lot of really good things about the One Size Oil Sucker Primer, and there was one other product as well. It's from a brand that I don't have any experience with. I can't remember what it's called right now. I guess time will tell to see whether or not I end up going with my tried and true blurring balm powder or if I branch out and try something new when the time comes. There were a few eyeshadow palettes that landed on my radar that I didn't end up pulling the trigger on. One of those was the Huda Beauty Icy Nude eyeshadow palette. I was very, very tempted by this one simply because it seemed almost like a lighter version of the Pretty Grunge palette to me, with a lot of those softer, cooler, pinkier tones that are just so attractive to me. And also given the fact that Huda said this was her last large-scale palette, I was extremely tempted. I had it in my basket and was really considering it a couple of different times, but I ended up not pulling the trigger for one particular reason. After seeing a number of reviews, I realized that a lot of those lighter shades were going to show up almost identically on my skin tone. There wasn't going to be a ton of variance in that palette despite the number of shades that were in there. Also, I think it was Jen Phelps. I think Jen Phelps was the only one that showed the Icy Nude in comparison to the ColourPop 1111 palette, which I own and adore. Obviously, the 1111 palette is significantly smaller palette, and it does have some warm tones in there that the Icy Nude does not. However, after seeing her swatches of the 1111 palette side by side with her swatches of the Icy Nude palette, I realized that a lot of what I was attracted to in the Icy Nude palette I already had in the 1111 palette, and at some values that made a little bit more sense on my particular skin tone. So ultimately I ended up not pulling the trigger on that one. Now, will I buy it? I don't think so. First of all, this is theoretically is a limited edition palette, so at some point I'm going to lose the opportunity to even consider purchasing this one. I think I can definitively say I don't need this palette, and it is a very expensive palette to be purchasing just for the fun of it and not because it really fills any particular gap in your collection. At this point, it would not be filling a gap for me. It would just be a feel-good purchase, and I'm not opposed to feel-good purchases. But that is a very expensive feel-good purchase. So yeah, I think that one is one that I'm going to end up entirely passing on. Another one that I considered was the re-release of the Naked palette. That I considered it briefly because of the cool leaning neutrals, and you know how much I love a good cool neutral eye palette. But while cool colors were kind of unique at the time that the Naked palette was released, I don't know, if this was like 2017 or 2018, I may have gone ahead and pulled the trigger on that Naked palette. Especially with all the buzz surrounding it and the people reviewing it and being like, oh, I remember how much I loved this palette and how much I used this palette. I went through a whole one, I panned every shadow, etc., etc. I may have been caught up in the hype a few years ago. However, over the last couple of years, I really do think cool tones have been trending a lot more. And because of that, I have so many more options when it comes to cool tones, both things that are in my collection and things that I could buy instead of the Naked palette. And those are coming from brands whose formula I absolutely trust more than the Urban Decay formula, especially with the fact that the Naked palette came back and it cost quite a bit more than I remember it costing back in the day. If I was going to spend that amount of money on a palette, I would buy the, I don't know, Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette, which I have been resisting since since it was released, or maybe even the Makeup by Mario palette, the cool toned neutral palette of his, that I have also eyeballed a little bit since it was released. So yeah, I don't think that the Naked palette would be my go-to despite all the buzz that it got over this last year, simply because there are other brands doing similar things now whose formulas I just trust a little bit more. The third one that I really considered was the What's Up Beauty Dragon Eye palette. I know it wasn't released in 2024, but it has been on my wish list for a while. And I actually seriously considered purchasing it last year in, I think it was August. I was trying to decide between the What's Up Dragon Eye palette and the Ensley Rain Cold Moon palette. And here's what finally made that decision for me. I did end up purchasing the Ensley Rain Cold Moon palette, and I'm very pleased with that decision. The way I was finally able to make that decision is I asked myself, if both of these palettes permanently went out of stock today, and I lost my opportunity to ever own either of them, which one would I be the most sad about? And it turns out that was the Ensley Rain Cold Moon for me. Obviously the Dragon Eye palette and the Cold Moon palette are not dupes in any way, and I'm not suggesting that, but I do think for the purposes of how I like to do my makeup and the parts of those palettes that are really attractive to me, there's a lot of overlap, especially in those kind of cooler purpley matte tones that both of the palettes have that are very, very attractive to me. Given the fact that I have the Cold Moon palette, I have the Jewels and Gems palette from Odin's Eye, which also has a lot of those tones, and another indie palette that recently came into my collection thanks to a good friend who has decluttered it to me. I think all of my bases are covered when it comes to what the Dragon Eye palette could offer me. Now, does that mean I absolutely won't buy the Dragon Eye palette? I don't know. To be perfectly honest, I can't promise you that I won't. What I can promise you is that I don't need it. So if I can cling to that knowledge that this is not something that would be filling a hole in my collection by any means, then I may be able to continue to resist that purchase until it is no longer available and that decision is finally taken out of my hands. So we'll see what happens. There were also a couple of blushes that really kind of tempted me. The first one was the Rare Beauty Soft Pinch Luminous Powder Blush in the shade Hope. I was really intrigued in that one. I even went in store and swatched it, and heavily considered that one. The reviews from the people that I watch were very split. I had some people in my feed who really, really loved this blush and just thought it was everything that they had hoped for. But I had an equal number of people who were like, it's just too metallic. And while I love a glowy blush, I have had that experience with certain blushes that were metallic enough that they looked a little bit ashy on my cheeks, and I just didn't know which way that blush would lean. Because of that, and also given the fact that I was focusing really, really hard last year on my ColourPop Drop of a Hat blush, I ended up not picking this one up. Another blush that I was super tempted by when it was released was the Kosas Blush is Life blushes. Now, I was able to hold off on that particular purchase for a couple of reasons. One is the description of this blush. A lot of people really loved this blush, but I really felt like the description of this blush was very similar to some blushes I already own, including the Hourglass blushes and the Essence Pure Nude blushes as well. All of which I absolutely adore, that just very softly luminous type of blush. I have plenty of those. Now, obviously, having plenty of something does not always prevent me from buying more. But the thing that really clinched it for me was this is a Kosas product. I've only owned one other Kosas product. It was the Kosas Tinted Face Oil. I owned it briefly as a mixing medium for my other foundations, and then I decluttered it because it was just, the oil was just a little bit too much, even in the wintertime for me. But I also am incredibly wary of Kosas. There are several clean brands that are very popular at the moment that I am super wary of, simply because their shelf life seems to be pretty minuscule. I see a lot of people decluttering Kosas and Tower 28 products in particular because they've gone bad. And when we're considering a collection that's as large as mine, I can't really invest that much money in a product that's going to be super strict about that 18-month shelf life. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how much use I would be able to get out of that product within that 18-month window, given all of the other things that I have in my collection that are very similar and also vying for my attention. So for those reasons, I decided not to purchase the new Kosas blushes. Another thing that really tempted me this last year were the Auric face palettes. I adore a good face palette. I don't know what it is about the collection of multiple face products in one palette that is just so compelling to me, but it is. I'm a sucker for face palettes. So when the Auric face palettes came out, I was absolutely tempted. However, there were a couple of things that saved me from this particular purchase, and one of those was a realization I have just had over this last year that I don't prefer a cream bronzer. I really enjoy a cream contour, but when it comes to a bronzer, I really just prefer a powder. I'm just much more comfortable with the application process of a powder bronzer than I am of a cream bronzer, and I usually end up liking the resulting look a lot better as well. I have also come to the realization that while I definitely prefer a cooler, more neutral undertone in my bronzers, I definitely don't want a whole lot of warmth in my bronzers. I feel like too much yellow in a bronzer can look extremely unnatural on my skin tone, except in the very depths of summer where my slightly warmer overtone comes out a little bit more. However, despite the fact that I want a cooler bronzer, when it comes to highlights, I do feel like a slightly warmer highlight really flatters that slightly warm overtone in my skin a little bit more than a cooler, more icy one does. Those cooler, icier highlights tend to stand out on me a little bit more than I would personally like. And therein lies the problem. In most of the face palettes that I've found that have a cooler or more neutral bronzer, they are almost invariably paired with a cool or more icy highlight. That means that either way I go, one of those products is not going to be my favorite. So that definitely was something that talked me out of the Auric face palette. And also that's something I'm really going to have to consider going forward if I acquire any further face palettes. The fact that I really do want more warmth in my highlighter, but less warmth in my bronzer. I don't know if this is just me. Is it just me? I want a cool bronzer, but a warm highlight. I feel like I can go either way with a blush. My absolute favorite blush, which is the Drop of a Hat by ColourPop, is a pretty warm blush. But I do also have cooler mauve and berry tone blushes that I also really enjoy. So I don't think it's a hard and fast rule for me when it comes to blushes, but absolutely for highlights, that was a big discovery for me. I definitely prefer a little bit more warmth in that highlight. So that kind of settled things for me as far as the Auric face palette went. Okay, we just have a couple more products to talk about. One of them was the Kayali Yum Bougie Marshmallow Perfume. This one, when I heard about strawberry, vanilla, and freesia is one of my favorite notes in a perfume, along with the pink musk. It sounded phenomenal. But there were a couple of things that held me back. One of them is the fact that I have another perfume that I adore from Kayali. To be perfectly honest, I love all of Kayali's scents. They are all just delicious to me. The one that I was obsessed with over this last year was the Eden Juicy Apple perfume. I picked up a travel size of that perfume earlier last year, went through it in record time, and then purchased the full-size bottle in November. As I have continued to wear this perfume, I have come to a couple of realizations. And one of them is about Kayali perfumes in general. They just don't last on me. There's not a whole lot of projection. My husband, like, his nose has to be in my neck in order to smell anything at all. And I'm realizing that lack of projection and the fact that it really doesn't last on me, that's the reason I went through that travel size so quickly. Not just because I love it, because I do love it, but because I just need more of it in order for it to make any kind of impact on me. And it is theoretically something that I could be applying multiple times a day. Recently, I have been working on this travel size of the Kilian's Angel Share, which I love for this time of the year. It is so warm and spicy and cozy feeling, but this is a beast. I put this one on and it's on until I take a shower. Sometimes I feel like I can still smell it after the shower. Everyone else can smell it. The projection and the lasting power of Kilian fragrances is unparalleled. And I just don't find that to be the case with Kayali's. So that was absolutely consideration. Also the fact that it includes marshmallow. I am pretty wary of a marshmallow note because a lot of the marshmallow notes that are used in fragrances, to me, to my nose, read as straight root beer candy, which is not one of my favorite scents. That's what ruined the Love Don't Be Shy by Kilian for me, is it just smelled like root beer candy. I mean, I could smell the other notes as well, but that strong root beer candy scent really put me off. Root beer traditionally contains sassafras, and sassafras is used as a scent compound for a lot of marshmallow notes. I know everybody loves Love Don't Be Shy. I put it on, all I can smell is root beer candy. Like, not even actual root beer, but root beer, those hard root beer candies that you get in your Halloween bag. Just, I'm not paying that amount of money to smell like bottom tier Halloween candy. You know what I'm saying? I'm not 100% sure that that's what was used in the Yum Bougie Marshmallow perfume. It may, because there are other scent compounds that can be used for marshmallow notes. But yeah, that put me off a little bit, despite the fact that the idea of strawberry and vanilla together sounded kind of amazing. Yeah, that combined with the fact that Kayali just doesn't stick around on me, that was enough to knock that one off of my wish list, and I don't see myself picking it up in the future. The last product that I really considered, well, it's actually two products that I kind of considered for the same purpose. So I have a love-hate relationship with the Sephora Pro number 47 brush. Let me see if I can find it. This is it here, okay? The reason why, I probably have a picture of it up here too, but the reason why I wanted to show you this is because I can show you what I don't like about it. I love this brush for cream or liquid products. I feel like it is perfect for a cream or liquid blush. It is perfect for a cream contour. Really, really, really enjoy this shape. Because of that, I have two of these, one to use with my blush and one to use with contour / bronzer, okay? Here's the problem that I have with the Sephora 47 is I don't know if you can see. Do you see all of these little hairs? The camera is focusing on me, so you probably can't see it. But this, okay, I'm sure you can see that. I am very gentle with my brushes when I wash them, but because this is used for cream products, I do have to be very thorough. And from day one, from the very first wash that I ever put this brush through, I have been losing hairs off the back end of it. And that is also the case with the second one that I purchased. So I was really, really unhappy with that. Someone told me that the BK Beauty 109 was a bit bigger than this one, but was a similar shape. So I really did consider picking that one up. The only thing that really was a barrier to me was the price, because the price, especially given how much money I spent on makeup brushes in general last year, it was probably my largest single beauty expenditure was makeup brushes. So I felt like I needed to hold off at least until this one becomes so thin that it's no longer usable. I feel like I have to use this one into the ground before I can justify spending that much money. Then Refer also came out with their own version of this sort of medium-sized kitty paw type brush. They first came out with their foundation brush and their concealer brush, both of which I purchased and love. I love those brushes, but customers requested a smaller version of the foundation brush, which ended up looking a lot like this, or the BK Beauty 109. I do believe it's larger than this, but not quite as large as the BK 109. And I think it would be perfect. I actually was very tempted by that one. The price was definitely more reasonable than the BK Beauty, and so I really did seriously consider purchasing it. However, at the moment, Refer is only offering that medium-sized brush in combination with the foundation brush, which I already own. It didn't make sense for me to buy another foundation. I don't need another Refer foundation brush. I already have one. I love it. I don't need a second one helping me to procrastinate washing my makeup brushes. I don't need any help with that, especially given the fact that ultimately I would like to have two of them. So this is a product that I can actually say, if Refer does start selling this particular brush on its own over the next year, which they probably will, I will probably pick at least one of them up. Until then, I'm going to go ahead and try to get as much use out of these Sephora Pro brushes as I can. But gosh, what a disappointment. What a disappointment. I got my Sephora 47s on sale. So they were only about $21 a piece, but that's still a significant amount of money for a makeup brush, and especially one that began falling apart immediately. Really unhappy with that. If Refer ends up selling that brush as a single over the next year, I will probably pick at least one of them up. And that is it. That is everything that really made it onto my short list while I was trying so hard to stick to my low buy / no buy in the year of 2024. And I don't make any promises. Some of these products you may see make an appearance in my monthly roundup as new purchases, but I think for a good number of these things, I've managed to like permanently talk myself out of it. And I really feel like a lot of the value of the low buy that I participated in this last year, it was really helpful in kind of helping me delay some of these purchases, maybe not forever, but long enough to really consider them and make the determination of how valuable they're going to be in my collection in the long term. And ultimately, that's what I want to be doing. I want to be able to be making really informed, conscious, deliberate decisions when it comes to bringing new things into my collection, rather than being seized by the impulse of the moment. And because of that, I think that the purchases that I am making are going to be ones that are going to be more satisfying for me in the long run, after the thrill of the purchase itself has worn off. So tell me, what did you almost buy in 2024 that you managed to talk yourself out of, or not? What did you not manage to talk yourself out of? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.